Imagine walking into a store with just $5 in your pocket. Today, that might buy you a fancy coffee and a muffin, or maybe a fast food meal if you're lucky. But what if I told you that a century ago, that same $5 bill could transform your entire week, fill your pantry, clothe your family, and still leave change in your pocket? Welcome to 1920, a year that sits at one of the most fascinating crossroads in American history. The Great War had just ended, the roaring twenties were beginning to roar, and the purchasing power of the American dollar was about to tell us an incredible story about how dramatically our world has changed. The shocking truth. Here's something that will blow your mind. $5 in 1920 had the purchasing power of approximately $150 today. That's not a typo. A single $5 bill from 1920 could buy what would cost you 30 times more in today's money. But the story goes far deeper than simple inflation calculations. It's about a completely different world, different values, different priorities, and a way of life that seems almost alien to us now. Think about it this way. When your great-grandfather pulled out a $5 bill, he wasn't just holding paper money. He was holding the power to feed his family for 2 weeks, buy a brand new suit, take his sweetheart to the movies a dozen times, or purchase enough gasoline to drive from New York to Chicago. In today's terms, that's like walking around with a small fortune in your wallet for everyday purchases. Setting the scene, America in 1920. To truly understand what $5 could buy in 1920, we need to step into that world completely. Close your eyes for a moment and picture this. The streets are filled with Model T Fords, their engines puttering along at a top speed of 45 miles per hour. Women are celebrating their newly won right to vote. Jazz music is spilling out of speakeasies, even as prohibition is just beginning to take hold. Electric lights are still a relative novelty in many homes, and the radio is about to revolutionize how Americans spend their evenings. The average American worker in 1920 earned about $25 per week, and that was considered a decent wage. A factory worker might take home $20, while a skilled craftsman could command $30 or even $40 weekly. This means that our $5 bill represented a full day's wages for many Americans, or even 2 days' worth for lower-paid workers. It was serious money, the kind you thought carefully about before spending. But here's what makes 1920 so special. It wasn't just that money went further, it's that the entire economic landscape was fundamentally different. There was no credit card debt, no streaming subscriptions, no smartphone bills, no car insurance payments that rival a mortgage. People's relationships with money, with possessions, and with value itself were constructed on entirely different foundations. The psychology of value. When we talk about what $5 could buy in 1920, we're not just discussing economics. We're exploring a completely different mindset about value, quality, and consumption. In 1920, when someone made a purchase, they expected it to last. A pair of shoes wasn't a seasonal fashion statement. It was an investment meant to be resoled multiple times and worn for years. A coat was something you might pass down to your children. Quality wasn't a luxury marketing term. It was the baseline expectation. This mindset shaped everything. Manufacturers built products to endure because their reputation depended on it. There were no planned obsolescence strategies, no disposable culture, no fast fashion industry churning out cheap garments designed to fall apart after a season. When you spent money, you were investing in items that would serve you for the long haul. Consider the humble pocket watch, which could be purchased for around $4 in 1920. This wasn't just a timepiece. It was a precision instrument that would keep accurate time for decades, could be repaired by any watchmaker in any town, and was often engraved and passed down through generations. Today we replace our smartphones every 2 or 3 years, spending hundreds or thousands of dollars each time, and we don't think twice about it. The Great Divide. Then and now. What makes the comparison between 1920 and today so fascinating isn't just the difference in prices. It's the difference in how those prices shaped daily life and decision-making. When a loaf of bread cost 10 cents and you earned $25 a week, you could buy 250 loaves of bread with your weekly wages. Today, with a $40 loaf of artisanal bread, or even a $3 standard loaf, and median weekly earnings around $1,000, the ratio has shifted dramatically. But the real story isn't in the numbers. It's in what those numbers meant for how people lived. In 1920, a family could survive and even thrive on a single modest income. A man working as a clerk earning $25 per week could support a wife and 2 children, rent a decent apartment, put food on the table every day, save money for the future, and still have enough left over for modest entertainment and the occasional luxury. This wasn't because people in 1920 were financially wiser or more disciplined than we are today, though frugality was certainly more culturally valued. It was because the economic structure of society was fundamentally different. Housing costs didn't consume 40 or 50% of a family's income. Healthcare, while less advanced, was also vastly less expensive. Education was more accessible and affordable. The cost of simply existing and participating in society was proportionally much lower. The promise ahead. As we journey through what $5 could buy in 1920, we'll discover some surprising truths about value, progress, and what we've gained and lost over the past century. We'll walk through grocery stores where that $5 could fill multiple bags with fresh food. We'll visit clothing stores where a complete outfit cost less than dinner at a restaurant today. We'll explore entertainment options that were astonishingly affordable, and we'll examine how this abundance shaped American culture during one of its most dynamic decades. But most importantly, we'll ask ourselves, are we actually better off today, or have we simply exchanged one set of trade-offs for another? The answer might surprise you, and it definitely isn't as simple as looking at price tags. Let's start our journey where every family's budget began in 1920, the grocery store. Picture yourself pushing open the door of a local market on a crisp morning in 1920. The smell hits you first: fresh bread baking, sawdust on the wooden floors, and the earthy scent of produce brought in from nearby farms that very morning. There are no fluorescent lights humming overhead, no shopping carts to push around, and certainly no barcode scanners at checkout. Instead, you approach the counter, where a clerk in a white apron stands ready to help you. You don't simply grab items off shelves, you tell him what you need, and he fetches it from behind the counter or from the shelves behind him. Everything is weighed, measured, and wrapped right in front of you. This personal service isn't a luxury, it's just how shopping works. Now, let's talk about what your $5 can actually buy. Hold on to your hat, because these numbers are going to seem like fantasy. The incredible bounty of $5. With your $5 bill, you could walk out of that grocery store with enough food to feed a family of 4 for an entire week. And we're not talking about bare-bones survival rations. We're talking about hearty, substantial meals 3 times a day. Let's break it down item by item. A pound of round steak, one of the better cuts of beef, cost about 40 cents. That same $5 could buy you 12.5 pounds of quality steak. But let's be more realistic about a family's actual shopping. Bread, the cornerstone of every meal, cost just 10 cents for a fresh loaf. You could buy 50 loaves with $5, though obviously no family needed that much bread at once. A dozen eggs? 60 cents. That's more than 8 dozen eggs for your $5, nearly 100 eggs. A quart of milk cost 14 cents, meaning you could purchase over 30 quarts. A pound of butter was 65 cents, giving you almost 8 pounds. Sugar, 1 pound, cost about 10 cents, 50 pounds for $5. Coffee, a luxury that many families cherished, was 47 cents per pound. More than 10 pounds for our $5 investment. But let's put together a realistic weekly shopping trip for our family of 4. You'd likely spend $1.20 on 3 pounds of beef, mixing cheaper cuts with one better cut for Sunday dinner, 30 cents for 3 loaves of bread, 60 cents for a dozen eggs, 42 cents for 3 quarts of milk, 65 cents for a pound of butter, 30 cents for 3 pounds of potatoes, 20 cents for a pound of coffee, 20 cents for 2 pounds of sugar, 30 cents for vegetables, 25 cents for a pound of bacon, and 40 cents for flour, rice, and other staples. Add it all up, and you've spent $4.82. You still have 18 cents left, enough to buy 2 more loaves of bread or splurge on something special like a can of peaches or a bar of chocolate. The quality question. Now, before you start thinking that everything was cheap because it was inferior, let's set the record straight. The food you bought in 1920 was, in many ways, higher quality than what fills our supermarket shelves today. That beef, It came from cattle that were grass-fed and raised on local farms, not confined in industrial feedlots. Those eggs, they came from chickens that actually saw daylight and pecked at real ground, not from birds crammed into battery cages. The milk was whole milk, rich and creamy, often delivered fresh to your doorstep each morning by a milkman who knew your family by name. It wasn't homogenized or ultra-pasteurized or processed beyond recognition. The vegetables were seasonal and local because there was no other option. No massive refrigerated trucks bringing produce from across the continent. No artificial ripening agents. No genetic modification. What you got was what grew near you when it was supposed to grow. The bread from your local bakery was made that day with simple ingredients: flour, water, yeast, salt. No preservatives were needed because bread wasn't expected to sit on a shelf for 2 weeks. It was baked fresh daily and you bought it fresh daily. The texture, the taste, the nutrition, all superior to the spongy, preservative-laden loaves that dominate grocery stores today. This raises an interesting question. Were things cheaper because they were worse? Or are things more expensive today because we've added layers of processing, packaging, marketing, and transportation that don't actually improve the product? In 1920, you weren't paying for flashy packaging, national advertising campaigns, or corporate profit margins stretched across multiple layers of distribution. You were paying for the food itself. Beyond the grocery store, household necessities. But food was just the beginning of what $5 could accomplish. Let's expand our shopping trip to include other household necessities that families needed regularly. A bar of soap, the good stuff, like Ivory or Palmolive, cost about 8 cents. You could buy more than 60 bars with $5, enough to keep your family clean for months. A tube of toothpaste was a quarter, giving you 20 tubes. Laundry soap, sold in larger quantities, was about 25 cents for enough to last a month of washing. Coal for heating, essential for most homes, cost about $10 per ton, meaning your $5 would buy half a ton, enough to keep a small house warm for several weeks in winter. Electric service, for those fortunate enough to have it, cost about 7 cents per kilowatt hour. $5 bought you over 70 kilowatt hours of electricity. Considering that most homes in 1920 had only a handful of light bulbs and maybe a fan, this was quite substantial. Many families' entire monthly electric bill was less than $5. Kerosene, still widely used for lighting and heating in rural areas, cost about 15 cents per gallon. Your $5 purchased over 30 gallons, enough to keep lamps burning for months. Matches, those essential little tools we take completely for granted today, came in boxes of about 50 and cost just a penny. $5 would buy you 25,000 matches, enough for a lifetime. The lost art of making things last. What's crucial to understand about 1920 is that these low prices existed within a culture that valued durability and frugality in ways that seem almost quaint to us now. Women didn't just cook meals. They preserved food, canned vegetables from their gardens, made their own bread, churned their own butter if they lived rurally, and wasted absolutely nothing. Meat bones became soup stock. Stale bread became bread pudding or stuffing. Vegetable scraps fed the chickens or went into the compost heap. Men repaired things rather than replacing them. A broken chair was fixed, not thrown out. Worn clothing was mended, patched, and when it could no longer serve its original purpose, the fabric was repurposed into quilts, cleaning rags, or children's clothes. This wasn't because people in 1920 were more virtuous than we are. It was economic necessity combined with cultural expectation. This mindset meant that a dollar went even further than the raw prices suggest, because families extracted maximum value from every purchase through care, maintenance, and creative reuse. The $5 you spent on groceries didn't just represent 1 week of food. It represented ingredients that would be stretched, supplemented with homegrown produce, and utilized with zero waste. Now let's walk down the street from the grocery store to the department store, where our $5 bill is about to reveal some truly astonishing purchasing power in the clothing department. In 1920, clothing represented a much larger investment relative to income than food did. Yet even here, $5 could work miracles that seem impossible by today's standards. A man's complete suit, jacket, vest, and trousers, made from decent wool fabric, could be purchased for $12 to $15 at a quality department store like Macy's or Marshall Field's. But if you were willing to shop at a more budget-conscious retailer like Sears, Roebuck and Company, you could find perfectly serviceable suits for as little as $8. Now, our $5 won't buy a complete suit, but let's see what it will buy. A pair of men's dress shoes cost about $3.50. Good leather shoes, resolable, built to last for years with proper care. That leaves you with $1.50 for a nice shirt at 75 cents and a silk tie for another 75 cents. Or you could skip the shoes and buy a complete outfit, 2 shirts at 75 cents each, 2 pairs of socks at 20 cents per pair, 2 ties at 75 cents each, and a nice felt hat for $2. You'd spend $4.60 and walk out looking dapper. For women, the options were equally impressive. A stylish dress suitable for church or social occasions could be purchased for about $3.50. A good winter coat ran about $10, so our $5 wouldn't quite cover it, but a lighter spring coat could be had for $4. Women's shoes averaged $2.50 to $3 for quality leather footwear. With $5, a woman could buy a nice dress, a pair of shoes, and still have money left for stockings, which cost about 35 cents per pair. Children's clothing was remarkably affordable. A boy's suit with short pants cost about $2.50. A girl's dress ran about $1.50 to $2. You could completely outfit a child from head to toe, shoes, clothing, undergarments, and a coat, for less than $10, meaning our $5 could half outfit a child or buy several individual items of substantial quality. The fabric of quality. What made these prices even more remarkable was the construction quality. Garments in 1920 were built to endure. Seams were reinforced, buttons were sewn on securely with thick thread, fabrics were woven densely, and tailoring was precise. Fast fashion didn't exist. When you bought a suit or a dress, you expected to wear it for years, not months. Repairs were common and expected. A good tailor or seamstress in every neighborhood could alter, mend, or update garments for very reasonable fees. Women often bought fabric by the yard and made their own clothes. Cotton fabric cost about 20 to 30 cents per yard, and a dress might require 4 to 6 yards. For less than $2 in fabric, plus some thread, buttons, and effort, a skilled seamstress could create a dress identical to one selling for $3.50 in stores. Many women made this choice, not necessarily because they couldn't afford store-bought clothing, but because homemade meant you could customize the fit and style exactly to your preferences. Entertainment, the golden age of affordable fun. After outfitting yourself, let's talk about what $5 could buy you in terms of entertainment. And this is where 1920 truly shines as perhaps the golden age of accessible leisure activities. A ticket to see a movie at your local cinema cost 15 cents for adults and 10 cents for children. These weren't short films or low-quality productions. By 1920, Hollywood was producing full-length feature films starring legends like Charlie Chaplin, Mary Pickford, and Douglas Fairbanks. The theaters themselves were often ornate palaces with plush seats, elaborate decorations, and live organ music accompanying the silent films. For 15 cents, you got 2 hours of escapism in an environment designed to make you feel like royalty. With $5, you could take yourself to the movies more than 30 times. Or, thinking more practically, you could take your wife and 2 children to the pictures for 50 cents total, which means your $5 could provide 10 complete family movie outings. Imagine that. 10 memorable family evenings at the cinema for the price of what a single movie ticket costs today. But the cinema wasn't the only entertainment option. Live theater, which sounds expensive and exclusive to our modern ears, was remarkably accessible in 1920. Vaudeville shows, which featured variety acts including comedians, singers, dancers, magicians, and acrobats, charged about 25 cents for admission. These weren't brief performances. A vaudeville show might run 3 hours with a dozen different acts. Your $5 bought 20 shows, or 10 complete dates where you could take someone special for an evening of live entertainment. Baseball games, America's favorite pastime, cost about 50 cents for a decent seat, 75 cents for a good seat, and $1 for a premium box seat. Your $5 could get you to 10 games with money left over for hot dogs and peanuts, Or you could splurge on 5 games with excellent seats. Professional baseball in 1920 was entering its golden age. Babe Ruth had just joined the Yankees, and the sport was capturing the nation's imagination. Dance halls charged admission of 25 to 50 cents per person, and for that price you could dance all evening to live bands playing the latest jazz and ragtime. For $1, a couple could enjoy an entire evening of dancing, socializing, and music. Your $5 represented 5 dance dates with change to spare. Reading and self-improvement. Books and magazines were also remarkably affordable. A hardcover novel from a major publisher cost about $1.50. Popular magazines like the Saturday Evening Post, Collier's, or Ladies' Home Journal cost 5 to 15 cents per issue. Your $5 could buy 3 books and still leave money for several magazine subscriptions, or you could purchase a year's worth of weekly and monthly publications to keep yourself informed and entertained. Newspapers cost just 2 or 3 cents per day. For $1, you could buy a daily newspaper every day for an entire month. $5 represented 5 months of daily news delivery, keeping you connected to local, national, and international events. In an era before radio broadcasting became widespread, that would come later in the 1920s, newspapers and magazines were the primary sources of information, and they were accessible to virtually everyone. Transportation, going places. Let's talk about getting around. In 1920, America was in transition between horse-drawn transportation and the automobile age, and this created some fascinating dynamics in transportation costs. A ticket on the streetcar or trolley, which connected most urban and suburban areas, cost a nickel, 5 cents. Your $5 bill represented 100 streetcar rides. For someone commuting to work 5 days a week, that's 10 weeks of daily round-trip commuting. Or if you prefer to think about it differently, you could explore every corner of your city, taking the trolley anywhere and everywhere, for months on end. Gasoline for automobiles cost about 20 cents per gallon. $5 bought you 25 gallons of fuel. Now, considering that a Model T Ford got about 20 to 25 miles per gallon, your $5 of gasoline could take you 500 to 600 miles, enough to drive from New York to Chicago or from San Francisco to Los Angeles with fuel to spare. But here's the catch. While gasoline was cheap, automobiles themselves were still significant investments. A brand new Model T in 1920 cost about $350, which means you'd need $75 bills to purchase one. However, used cars were available for much less, and a reliable second-hand vehicle might cost $100 to $150. Still, even at these prices, car ownership represented a major financial commitment that not every family could manage. For those without automobiles, bicycles were extremely popular. A quality bicycle cost about $25, so our $5 represents 1/5 of the price. But bicycle rentals were available for 10 cents per hour or 25 cents for an entire day. Your $5 could rent you a bicycle for 20 days of use, or if you were more occasional in your cycling, it might represent months' worth of rental enjoyment. Train travel, America on rails. Intercity rail travel was the primary means of long-distance transportation in 1920, and here too, $5 could take you surprisingly far. A coach seat on a train from New York to Philadelphia, about 90 miles, cost approximately $2. From New York to Washington, D.C., 225 miles, ran about $4.50 in coach. Your $5 could transport you from New York to the nation's capital with change in your pocket. For longer distances, a coach seat from New York to Chicago, nearly 900 miles, cost about $15, 3 times our $5 budget. But this was for a journey that took about 24 hours and included the comfort of a seat, access to a dining car, and the adventure of watching America roll past your window. Compared to today's airfares, adjusting for purchasing power, rail travel was remarkably affordable. The social currency of $5. What's perhaps most striking about entertainment and transportation in 1920 is how these low costs democratized leisure and mobility. Entertainment wasn't the exclusive domain of the wealthy. Working-class families could regularly afford movies, shows, sports events, and outings. The cities weren't divided into zones that only certain income brackets could afford to visit. For a nickel, anyone could ride the trolley anywhere. This accessibility created a shared cultural experience that crossed class lines in ways that have largely disappeared today. The factory worker and the bank manager might see the same movie at the same theater on the same night. They might sit in the same ballpark watching the same game. This shared cultural space, made possible by truly affordable entertainment and transportation, helped create a more cohesive national identity during the 1920s. Now we reach perhaps the most dramatic difference between 1920 and today: housing costs. In 1920, the average home sold for approximately $3,000, a proper family home with multiple bedrooms, kitchen, and indoor plumbing in cities. A typical worker earning $25 per week made $1,300 annually, meaning a house cost about 2.5 years of gross wages. Today, homes represent more than 5 years of gross income, twice as long. Most families rented. Monthly rent for a modest city apartment averaged $15 to $25, less than 1 week's wages. Today, rent often consumes 50% of income. In 1920, housing took only 20 to 30% of a family's budget. Our $5 represented about 1 week's housing cost, making a significant difference when combined with weekly wages. Services that seem like fantasy. Our doctor's house call cost $2. Yes, doctors came to your home, examined patients, provided treatment, and left care instructions, all for $2. $5 covered 2 visits plus medication. Dental care was equally accessible. Extractions cost 50 cents to $1. Fillings about $2, cleanings $1. Your $5 handled multiple procedures. A men's haircut cost 25 cents at the barber shop. A social institution where men gathered for conversation, shaves with straight razors, hot towels and shoe shines, all included. Women paid 35 cents at beauty parlors. $5 meant 20 haircuts for men or 14 for women, months of grooming for the whole family. Household help cost 50 cents for half a day's work, $1 for a full day. $5 hired help for 5 full days of cleaning, cooking, or laundry. Many middle-class families employed part-time help weekly within their budgets. Education, within reach. College tuition at state universities averaged $75 per year. 15 $5 bills covered an entire year of higher education. A student working part-time at $10 weekly could pay annual tuition in under 2 months. Even with room and board adding $100 to $150, college was achievable for modest families who saved. Student debt didn't exist as we know it today. $5 represented meaningful savings potential. Banks paid 4 to 5% interest annually. Saving $5 weekly accumulated $260 yearly, plus interest. Families could build house down payments in 3 to 5 years and create emergency funds covering several months of expenses. The financial future felt accessible. What we've lost and gained. The raw purchasing power of money has declined dramatically. What cost $5 then costs $150 to $200 today. Housing, healthcare, and education have become dramatically more expensive relative to income. The ease of supporting a family on one modest income has largely disappeared. But we've gained tremendously. Modern medicine cures diseases that were death sentences in 1920. We have climate control, year-round global food access, unlimited entertainment options, workplace safety regulations, and social safety nets. Average lifespan jumped from 54 to nearly 80 years. Infant mortality plummeted. Educational opportunities expanded regardless of gender, race, or class. The paradox we live. Here's the paradox. Despite technological advances and increased productivity, many Americans feel more financially stressed than their great-grandparents in 1920. Modern life includes mandatory expenses that didn't exist: health insurance, car insurance, internet service, smartphone bills, student loans. These costs are built into modern life's structure. Cultural shifts matter too. We replace cars frequently, though they last decades. Fashion cycles encourage constant clothing replacement. Houses are twice the size with expectations of multiple bathrooms and garages. These choices shape our financial reality. The real value. What could $5 really buy in 1920? It transcends our price lists. $5 bought peace of mind about life's necessities, knowing honest labor could feed your family nutritious food, provide shelter, decent clothing, and leave extra for pleasure and savings. It bought access to culture and entertainment without constant affordability calculations. It bought realistic upward mobility through education and work. $5 symbolized an economic era when life's basics were genuinely affordable. Saving felt possible rather than fantastical, and financial security seemed like a reasonable expectation rather than an unlikely dream. Final perspective. We can't and shouldn't return to 1920. Modern medicine, civil rights, technological convenience, and countless advances make today preferable in fundamental ways. But examining what $5 bought a century ago forces us to confront whether economic progress has truly served human flourishing for average people. The $5 bill from 1920 serves as a time capsule into a world where economic life operated on different principles. It reminds us that current arrangements aren't inevitable. They're choices. Perhaps the most valuable thing $5 in 1920 buys us today is perspective, clarity to see how far we've come, and how far we must go building an economy serving human needs and aspirations. That perspective is absolutely priceless.